All right, welcome in everyone. Ready to do another deep dive with me today.
Always ready to dive in.
So today we're taking a closer look at the case of Andrew Hammond. I've been going through some excerpts from a Wikipedia article about him, about the crimes he committed, his trial, and the sentence he ended up getting. And man, the more I read, the more questions I had about this guy and what happened.
Yeah, it was one of those cases that just pulls you in.
So let's start from the beginning. Who exactly was Andrew Hammond?
Well, let's see. According to the article, he was born back in 1995 in Oakhurst, California.
Oh, cursed, okay.
But then, between 2020 and 2022, he committed 3 murders in Fresno.
So not too far away, but still a move. 3 murders, though.
Yeah, and what's even crazier is that he already had a criminal record before all of this.
Really?
Convictions for grand theft auto, felony evasion, even assault, causing bodily harm.
Wow, so this wasn't just a sudden turn. It seems like he'd been headed down a bad path for a while.
You could say that. I mean, those kinds of charges, they definitely paint a picture of escalating offenses.
Yeah, you can't help but wonder if those earlier crimes were, like, a precursor to something more serious.
Yeah, definitely a possibility.
And it's easy to get lost in the details of a case like this, the dates, the charges. But we can't forget that at the heart of it all, there are real victims.
Of course, we have to remember those names, those people. Fernando Gonzalez was the first victim,
How old was he?
41.
41. And this happened when, back in 2020.
Yeah, September 28th, 2020. Sadly, the article doesn't go into much detail about how it all went down.
And then there's a gap, right? Before the next murder.
Exactly.
2 years.
2 years, that's a long time. What do you make of that?
I mean, it's really interesting. Could be a lot of things, Maybe he was laying low, refining his approach, waiting for another opportunity.
Or something changed in his life, some kind of trigger after all that time.
Could be, could be. That's part of the mystery, right?
For sure. And then the second murder happens.
October 21st, 2022. The victim was Stephen Rice. He was 47.
And how did this one happen? Well, according to the article, there was an argument, and then Hammond shot Rice.
An argument.
Yeah, and Rice actually tried to get away, jumped over a fence, but he collapsed in his neighbor's yard.
Oh, wow. That's awful. Imagine witnessing that.
It does make you wonder, an argument, was it something that just escalated, a crime of passion? Or was that argument, staged in some way?
That's a chilling thought.
Right, trying to manipulate the situation somehow. But without more information, it's tough to say.
And then the third murder.
Just a few weeks later, November 2nd, 2022. Brandon Munoz, he was only 39.
And he was.
Found shot to death in a vacant house.
3 murders.
Yeah.
It's really disturbing. And the locations, too. A vacant house, a neighbor's yard. It seems kind of random, but is it?
It's a good question. Maybe he deliberately chose those locations.
Yeah.
Places where he wouldn't be seen, places that were isolated.
So that could indicate some level of premeditation, right? That he was thinking about this, planning it out.
It's possible, yeah. It's like trying to understand the puzzle of his mind.
Right. Okay, so we have these 3 murders. What happens next? When does Hammond get caught?
Well, they arrested him pretty quickly after the last murder, just 6 days later.
6 days. That's fast. So they must have had some idea he was involved pretty early on, right?
Yeah, you'd think so.
Huh.
Something must have pointed them straight to him, whether it was evidence or witness statements or something.
It makes you curious. What did they find that led them to him so quickly? The article doesn't go into a ton of detail about the investigation itself, but it must have been pretty solid to make an arrest that fast.
Absolutely, to connect him to all 3 murders like that. They must have had a strong case right from the beginning. And, it's fascinating to think about what goes on behind the scenes in these investigations. It's like a whole other world, the forensics, the legal strategy, all that stuff. We only see a small part of it.
Right, right. So he's arrested 6 days after the 3rd murder, but he wasn't formally charged until January of 2023. What was the holdup?
Oh, that kind of delay. It's not uncommon, especially in a case like this with multiple victims.
So what were they doing during that time? Just like gathering more evidence?
I'd imagine so. Making sure they had a really strong case before they went ahead with the charges. You don't want to rush something like this.
Yeah, definitely not. You want to make sure you get it right. So then what? The trial starts when?
April 2024 in Fresno County.
Must have been intense.
I bet. All that buildup, and then finally it's time for the prosecution and the defense to present their cases, and then the jury, they have to decide.
And here's where it gets interesting. Hammond, he actually claimed self-defense for all 3 murders.
For all 3? Wow.
Yeah, I know, right? That seems like a pretty bold strategy.
It's definitely not typical. I mean, to convince a jury that he was in fear for his life 3 separate times.
Yeah. What are the odds of that? So did it work?
Nope. The jury wasn't buying it. Guilty on all counts, May 1st, 2024.
So they saw right through his story.
Seems like it. I guess the prosecution did a good job of proving their case over the sentence.
Let me see here. Okay, so June 27th, 2024, he gets 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus another 75 years on top of that for using a firearm.
Wow, so he's basically never getting out.
Nope. They threw the book at him, and for good reason. So, case closed, right. Justice served.
Well, yeah, legally speaking, sure. But there are still some unanswered questions, things we don't know for sure.
Oh, yeah, like what?
Well, the big one for me is motive. Why did he do it? The article doesn't really say.
Yeah, that's true. Was there something specific about these victims? Did he know them?
Exactly. Was it random or was there something more going on there?
Those are the things that really make you think, huh?
And then there's the question of whether there was any relationship between Hammond and the victims before the murders.
Yeah, did their paths cross at some point? Did something happen?
Who knows? If they did know each other, that could change how you look at the whole thing.
It's a whole other layer to the puzzle, right?
Right. And we don't have that piece.
And what about the evidence? Like, what specifically convinced the jury?
Yeah, what was the smoking gun, so to speak? You know, they must have had something pretty convincing to get those guilty verdicts.
True, but a lot of times those details, they don't become public knowledge.
Which is kind of frustrating, you know? You want to know the whole story.
Totally. Sometimes you just have to accept that you're not going to have all the answers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a reminder that real life is messy sometimes. You don't always get a nice, neat resolution.
You don't, it's true. But you know, those unresolved questions, those mysteries, they can really stay with you, make you think.
They do, they do. So even though we may never know everything about why Hammond did what he did, what can we take away from a case like this?
Well, I think it makes you consider the bigger picture. You know, like
Yeah.
how can we prevent tragedies like this from happening in the first place? How can we support the victims and their families?
And what about the people working on the case, the investigators, the prosecutors? They deal with some really heavy stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Putting all those pieces together, the evidence, the witness statements, trying to make sense of it all, it's a huge responsibility.
Yeah, and then there's the whole justice system, right? The trial, the sentencing. It makes you think about how we hold people accountable for their actions.
Right. And how that system works, how it can be improved. I mean, every case like this is a chance to learn and make things better.
So we've learned a lot about Andrew Hammond today, about his crimes, the victims, the trial, but we've also uncovered a lot of questions along the way.
Yeah, some things we may never have answers to. And that's okay. I mean, that's part of what makes these cases so fascinating.
It is, it is. It reminds us that real life isn't always black and white. There are so many layers, so many factors at play.
Exactly. And when we look at cases like this, it challenges us to think critically, to question what we think we know.
To keep an open mind and keep learning.
Absolutely. That's how we grow.
Well said. Well, if you want to dig into this case yourself, read through the Wikipedia article, maybe do some more research. I definitely recommend it. It's a fascinating story, even with those missing pieces.
And who knows, maybe you'll come up with some of your own theories, your own interpretations of the evidence.
Yeah, keep those brains working. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone. It's been great exploring this case with you. And until next time, keep asking questions and keep searching for the truth.